the integrators and the lighting designers need to learn to dance together better.
But here with lighting, when they're engaged with a lighting designer, they're really there to implement somebody else's vision. The integrators are kind of used to servicing themselves. We've had a couple of projects with integrators supplying lighting. I think they're learning a lot about it.
What the lighting designer does is, first of all, bridge across those different scopes, and secondly, edit it. Lighting's an editing tool.
It's not something that you sense from plans.
You reveal and conceal, you emphasize and you de-emphasize.
But what has become more common is projects are more complicated, or more complex, I should say. And so really it's about the collaboration that's necessary to deliver these projects. And ultimately they're going to learn, and we're going to get to that place. But to participate, I think, in the supply, we sort of hope and expect the same kind of courtesy and etiquette that comes with all of our professional relationships here.
I'm really interested to see what happens to the integration world.
Welcome to the Light Pod, built by Light-Eye, the #1 podcast for the people, process, and product about design, all with a little bit of love for light along the way. I'm your host, Sam Corbel, and today I'm absolutely ecstatic to welcome two friends back to this podcast. They're Light Pod alumni, and they're also incredibly established in the industry as professional lighting designers, Sean O'Connor and Thomas Paterson. I'd say they collectively have somewhere around 65, 70 years worth of work between the two of them, operating around the entire world. They're what we would call elite. They're masters of their craft. They've dedicated their lives to this. And today we're here to talk not only about that, but what it means to understand and acknowledge that in an ever-changing landscape of what is being classified as lighting design. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Cornet. Known for exceptional quality and bold high-performance linear lighting, they're now expanding into downlighting with the CDL3, offering the same trusted craftsmanship and a modular and versatile competitively priced solution for residential and commercial spaces. The same design for excellence is now on a spec-grade downlight. Now, let's get to know our guests a little bit more. Fundamentally, you can argue that you're a lighting designer if you alter light, whether that's daylight or electric light. But there's a process in which these guys have dedicated their lives to understanding how to do that. And there's a lot to it, but there's also a lot of people out there who are maybe only moving one out of the 30 levers they would and calling themselves lighting designers too. So it's important that we understand this, that we understand what we would all hope is a growing environment for a profession, but in a constructive way and in a positive way. Sean, Thomas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's crack-a-lackin'? What are you most excited about, in your life right now in the professional sphere of design and lighting design?
I think one of the things that as a collective we need to do as a lighting industry is that the integrators and the lighting designers need to learn to dance together better and to learn the etiquette of who moves first, who leads, who follows, under what circumstance. We are not experts in a whole lot of things that the integrators are doing. It would be foolish for me to say where speakers need to be. I might offer space for it on my RCP, but I don't know about sound distribution. So while I might object to where they've been placed on a plan, I solve that by making a phone call and talking to the integrator in their space and say, hey, could we shuffle them over 6 inches because then it all lines through? Or, instead of circular speakers, could we do square speakers? A pet peeve of mine, landscape speakers which are designed to look like light fixtures. So it looks like they're off and they're not in the same style as the actual landscape lights. Just let them look like speakers, please. Or have a conversation with us. And I think there's a lot to do in etiquette amongst ourselves as just picking up the phone and having these conversations.
How do we get to that place where when somebody new to the team is introduced and they're not introduced to us, can they introduce themselves to us? So we can begin that dialogue and talk about what that handshake looks like for that project, to deliver that project successfully, and to get on the same page early on so we can talk about what programming or commissioning looks like. What kind of gear are we using? Who's on first, who's doing what. And that's all great from the things that we've been doing historically as well.
And I think there's some courtesy things that we can do as lighting designers as well. If the integrator's coming in after us, why not run the concept presentation for them? Why not present the design to them?
Oh, absolutely.
So that we have they understand what the vision we're building is. Because saying, hey, you're just assembling this thing, you follow my drawings blindly and it'll be fine, is nowhere near as collaborative as saying, hey, come for this journey with us.
Yeah, you enroll them in it so that they can champion the project.
Totally.
There is, the lifestyle of the rich and famous and the 0.1%. And there's a lot of beautiful architecture out there, as you mentioned, Sean, that people are constantly inspired by, that also becomes beautifully lit when the right application, when the right treatment, when the right team comes together to make that happen. It can happen in stages, it can happen all together, but the reality as a part of that team more and more so often has become the lighting integrator or the AV integrator. And they're, quote, doing lighting, whether that's selling it, whether that's designing it, or whether that's just simply maybe even understanding what it is as a medium or a material or a line item on a bill of material that allegedly needs controls that don't come with it and need to be, drawn and programmed. What does light do in a home?
It's usually the intangibles for which there is language, but the layperson doesn't use the language. So one of the things we'll often talk about is contrast ratio. Is this a very contrasty space or not a very contrasty space? Is the light smooth in here or is it textured? These are not surprising words, but they're words which are quite subtle. A grid of downlights is going to give you very flat light wherever you do it. That can be the right solution, but more often than not, it's not. And so what can the light do for you in terms of bringing the house together is usually in bringing together some small set of values that run through everywhere and then letting the execution of that be different based on space and function and so on. I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
It's not something that you sense from plans necessarily. It really does come from the interaction with the team as a whole, starting with the client, the person who's going to live there. Then it's the architect's vision, the interior designer's vision, things like color palettes, all the things kind of come together to then allow you to respond with lighting to help tell that story. Like I was talking about earlier, the storytelling that happens here. It's not meant to sound cheesy, but ultimately you are trying to lead someone's visual system through a project to create, whether it's a sense of visual hierarchy, visual destination, you're providing cues to whoever the user is, the visitor, it doesn't matter. All those things are sort of a part of it. And, so the intention is super key to sort of determine what that intention is. And I think I've lost a bit of where you were intending to go with this, Sam. But then I think from there, if I make a leap, then it's all about the execution. So the grid of downlights, just to sort of say it out loud, is typically something that sounds like take the dark away.
Yes.
So take the dark away is lights. It's not even lighting, and it's definitely not lighting design. So I think when we talk about the different levels that go into developing a project, I think these are some of the things that sort of set apart lights or lighting, the bill of materials that you talked about earlier, a line item, I think was the word you used, versus sort of something that is art, if you will.
One of the things that we will do with young designer trying to work out how to approach a project is we'll have them do what we call the catalog method. And they look at each task that needs to be lit, and it doesn't involve fixture catalogs, to be clear. But, okay, I need to light the dining table. Okay, make me a list of all the places that lights could get to there from. So by definition, they have to be above that or reflecting off something above that, right? And so we've got ceiling, walls, floor, on the table, hanging in space, whatever. And then you say, well, what are all the different products and techniques that could be used for that? So we've got recessed downlights, surface downlights, track, pendant, surface-mounted ceiling. And again, you just make a vast list of everything. Mm-hmm. And if you do that for every room in the house, you end up with a short list of solutions which run through as common threads throughout the whole project. Yes. So this is a very downloady project, or it's a very sconcy project, and that's a way of getting the language to emerge if you don't have an intuitive language. Giving people a structure where they can pull out, oh, I see this common thread. Everywhere has sconces. And then in addition, some places have task lights and some places have pendants. Great, now there's a language to this project.
Can you guys both give me an example of a residential project that you had a moment in a room or a whole space where you experienced that firsthand?
I have a client who sends me photos of a tree in her garden every couple of months. And she's just blown away by this tree and it going through the seasons and so on. And the reason she sends it to her lighting designer is because as a lighting designer, I looked at the project, and through the door into her master bedroom, there's a window on the opposite side of the room. And I asked the landscape architect if they could put a vivid tree there. And I lit the hell out of it. It's blitzen. And it means that whenever you're in that room, there's something carrying your eye out through the glass and there's no reflection off the glass.
Let's just time out, break that down real quick, right? You're a lighting designer, but you said put a tree somewhere because what you actually understand is the visual system. What you actually understand is like a visual terminus or a place to look. And you said this would be a cool place to look through, but you need something to look at. And when you look at it, it needs to be lit.
Well, I wanted something there to light. There are 4 visual professionals on the typical projects we work with. There is an architect, there is an interior designer, there is a landscape architect, and there is a lighting designer. And you could think of them as the ones who initiate the experience of those spaces, the theme of them. What the lighting designer does is, first of all, bridge across those different scopes, and secondly, edit it. Lighting's an editing tool. You reveal and conceal, you emphasize and you de-emphasize. And if you can make those judgments, you're a long way along. If you find something where you need an emphasis and there is nothing to emphasize, you're not going to solve it as a lighting designer. No one's going to let me put a big floor lamp out in the garden out there. I need something to put light on. So I have a conversation with the landscape architect.
If you light everything, you see nothing, right? So we really have to sort of be able to sort of like compose something in that space. Maybe you don't want to see the building that's back there. You want to see this tree in the foreground more so, and that building, which maybe is on your property, wants to recede a little bit because you want to kind of also have an experience of getting there. It's that storytelling component. How do you sort of pick out those pieces and say, this is what I want to see, and this is what I don't want to see? It's so huge. It's not just taking the dark away or lighting everything. I'm thinking about my example. I've got 2 in mind. They're completely different.
One for me, one for you.
We just finished a beautiful project in New York City, an apartment high up in the sky. And it's very sort of, I don't know, classical architecture, not like crazy drippy stuff, but just very clean and traditional. And so there's really very few like lighting tricks. But I think what we've done in this particular project is so spot on. Like this sounds so crazy. It's so sort of almost expected, but the competence level of every move was nailed. There's nothing superfluous. Everything kind of works exactly as we had intended. And there's layers and cool things that we did that are not even part of the story that no one will ever know about. Power distribution system. It feels amazing. Yeah. The clients love it. The interior designer's blown away by it. I mean, like, it's the best feeling. There is a layout, of course. There's a drawing that sort of depicts all of the intention. There's all the layers of light. It starts with lamplight, actually. It was sort of our first basis in the sort of large living room space was lamplight. And then there was art light. There's a large expanse of glass. What do we do there? Sightline into the park. How do we frame that at night so that we don't just go dark on this large expanse? What are the other sort of visual cues? How are we taking care of sort of the feature objects that are in the space, the floral, all of these sort of elements? Oh, and I missed the art. And then there's this art. And then I think the thing that's really key is the scenes. It's the different light levels that are happening with the button presses that really sort of transform it from, bright enough to sort of compete with daylight, north facing, and then what happens at night in the next scenes. And it's just the power of those contrast levels, and having all the things at different heights in the space mean something, whether that's a horizontal surface of a coffee table with something sparkly on it, to the art, to the lamps that give the sparkle, some human placemaking scale, floral, feature objects. I mean, it's really, really solid.
What's your second example that you had?
Second example was a simpler project, but no less refined. It's a project we just finished in Palm Beach. It's very small. It's like 1,400 square feet. It's a total jewel box, though, and everything is uber intentional, really thought out. The interior designer says they hired us because they didn't want to see lights. Okay, so it's our first outing with the interior designer, and there are, of course, lights. There are lights that are feature elements. There are decorative lights that we designed in concert with them that are on the ceiling that kind of give us the sort of luminous glow of the space. Then it's peppered with some other sort of task light elements for art, wall mounted in this case, pretty low ceilings, and then some really sweet millwork details where it all just kind of comes together and creates these layers and composition with light. And again, with the scenes, it's just, I just want to hang out in these spaces.
You just slid in a comment, art light lit by the walls because the ceilings are kind of low. I mean, that was such a second nature thing to you. But I want to unpack that quickly, right? There's a reason why you didn't light it from the ceiling and you went to the wall, and it has to do with the ceiling height. That's just an example of a decision in consideration for not only the visual environment that you're going to see, but how you then experience and feel in that space. When you guys talk about all of this stuff, let's just pick on like the art light from the ceiling or the wall and a tree to look at. I know these are part of incredible projects that are beautiful, that are super expensive. And you spend lots of time doing that, but it doesn't have to be in order to have that attention to detail and this level of commitment on execution. It could be a farm in your backyard.
The tree house is a $3 million house, and the total lighting budget was well south of $100,000.
When you think about the idea, you have to do a couple things. First of all, create it, to your point. Then you have to document it. Then you have to communicate that. Then you have to see it through to life. All this to say, there's just a lot of thinking that goes into this. The execution isn't necessarily just quite simply, the product in the space. I want to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to dive into that just a little bit more as it relates to product, as it relates to how that is an important component of it, but only at a certain point. Sound good?
Yeah. Then the next thing I think that we haven't talked about as it relates to integrators, because again, I think that they're in the world of a deliverable. The deliverable is a plan. Maybe there's a detail. Maybe there's controls. They're going to wing the controls on the fly. I don't really know what to expect from their work. And again, there's levels to it. So it's not to say that everyone's at the same place. But then what happens on site? We get on ladders. We go crazy making that piece of art look the way it's supposed to look. And I don't know, from a delivery standpoint, where it starts and stops in the AV world. And I kind of don't care, but I think it's important to sort of say that lighting design is more than a deliverable.
You know, performance meets versatility with CDL3 from Coronet, a 3-inch modular downlight that brings powerful performance and adaptability to the field. With outputs up to 2400 lumens, a wide range of beam angles from 10 degrees to 80 degrees, and a modular design that adjusts on site, the CDL3 ensures a consistent spec-grade install no matter the field conditions. Thanks again to Coronet for being our partner for this episode. Welcome back. Over the break, we were talking just a little bit more about what goes into the sense of design and how that's more than just a plan. It's not just a deliverable. There's a multifaceted approach to it, and a deliverable is simply a result. When you guys look at the ecosystem and the environment of applying light to a space for the sake of visual comfort, being able to see things a certain way, direct people, maybe create some entertainment, right? Maybe create some dynamic entertainment or mimic certain things for fun at certain moments of the day, times, sensors. Oh my God, I can go on and on and on and on and on. All the things you can do with light. That's the theoretical process, right? The 10% of dreaming it. But like the procurement of the plans, what, the last 5% of the other 90%?
That last 5%, which is documentation for us, is the first 5% of a negotiation and an implementation for them when we're involved. I think we often become the transmission medium between teams because we're saying, no, over here we're doing this. You can do it there. One of the features which should be baseline in programming these days is area scenes, right?
Without a doubt.
I mean, the new way of programming a house should be that you set everywhere to your high scene and you set all your levels throughout the whole house in the high scene. And then you do your medium scene, and then you do your low scene, and then you do your night scene, and your very low scene, whatever you want to call those scenes, and you program them through the whole house. And if it's built right, it effectively breaks it up to all the buttons that those area scenes have been assigned to. And so instead of going room by room, in the middle of the afternoon, you do your middle of the afternoon scene. In the late night, you do your late night scene through the whole house. And you're not having to think, which scene am I editing? It's built well. And that's easier for the programmer. It means that if anyone goes back and edits this button, it automatically edits that button. It carries all of those sorts of things through. And if a client says, mid-afternoon, everything's a bit too bright, you're able to just call all that up in one efficient go and work with it in one efficient go.
Yeah. You can choose one button in the room at one keypad instead of having to go back and transcribe all that same information to all the other buttons that are the same in that same room.
That's right. Or even you set up a virtual keypad, which is the whole house, high, medium, low, and you assemble it out of area scenes. So there's a lot of these things which we now see someone doing superbly well, but other people don't even know that feature exists yet. Right. And so I think we end up translating a lot of information across between programmers. I think it's one of the major problems with training of programmers that the update process on training by most of the manufacturers is treated too much as being what the sales features are rather than what the functional capabilities are or the shortcuts.
Yeah, and the how-to.
And the how-to. If I see another programmer photograph their screen or take a screenshot to capture values to type in later, I'm going to scream.
Yeah, same.
It's not necessary anymore. You set whether you do it in a global, whether you do it button by button, whether you do it in area scenes, there is no reason for anything not to be permanently captured.
And similarly, I feel like there's no reason not to be programming live. Definitely want to sort of help raise the bar throughout the community so that everyone can work at a better, higher level, faster, and get the results they're looking for. I
agree with that. I think there's some other little useful things that a programmer can commit to do as well. For example, the good programmers are happy to look in the next day and check the log file to make sure the time clock happened as expected. These are computer systems. They've got lots of tools in them. And if well used, they can save a huge amount of time. And it doesn't wait until the client looks at it to know that that log file is.
I think it's just sort of understanding, again, what the expectations are and then working to achieve them and understanding that it doesn't have to sort of be, 30 minutes before sunset, you have to be on site to see that scene trigger that you're talking about.
Right.
It can be seen in the log. And so really about being proactive and trying to sort of get ahead of all these things so that it doesn't, you can upload the system at whatever point well in advance of the final focusing and sort of make sure all those things are functioning. What that scene looks like today when you're doing that versus what it looks like after it's all been focused and final commissioning scene setting is done might be different. But just getting that time clock flag to do its thing at the right moment and confirm it in advance is hugely important to the success of the project. I do feel like just psychologically people think once the lighting designer has been on site and done the work, everyone is done. And so trying to get people to come back and program the other keypads in the room, if they're not using area scenes or something, is really like pulling teeth to get that work completed once it's done, because there is a psychology that says, we did it and we're done. We've been talking about creating a matrix or a checklist. I mean, we have a pre-programming checklist that we send out. I think you have one as well. So it's sort of maybe, sharing some of this with the world at large so that, again, everyone can benefit from completing a project. We prescribe what all the button presses are. We do all of the labeling, what the keypads are, and then we'll even give a base level of light levels for those buttons, just so that when we show up, we can see that it's working. If the client walks through, 3 weeks before we get there, they push a button, they can kind of get the sense of what's already happening. And it's also what we use when we send our checklist out to the site before we get on a plane and travel across the world to make sure that the system is functioning. So they'll go through a series of things that the integrator will go through a series of things that we'll prescribe as testing to make sure that everything is working before we'll get on a plane and come out, so that we're not there necessarily having to troubleshoot something live. It's inevitable we'll troubleshoot something or some things, but the hope is that we have a fully operational system there. And then we can do all of the scene setting and kind of make all of that magic we talked about earlier.
There's a house that we completed recently, which has 3 different modes. It runs like a hotel. So the lights come on at dawn. The gym lights come on most strongly because the client likes to get up and go to the gym in the morning and work out. And then he goes to his biohacking room because, of course, there's a biohacking room where it chooses an appropriate tone and an appropriate speed of tone. And then he can choose if it brings on an entrainment program where the pulsing of the color of light actually entrains the pulse rate of the person in it. So it can actually dial their pulse rate in while they lie in their oxygen chamber. And then they come out of that and their house is just beautifully lit during the day, which is a really marginal amount of light. Then you have the gray hour, which is the hour before sunset, where it's still bright outside, but no useful nor joyous light is coming in. The place feels gray. That's when we have the lights up highest, is in the gray hour. And then through the evening, it drops down in a series of levels. And he's got his everyday version, which factors in his kid being in the house, all of those sorts of things. He has his party version, which is exactly what it sounds like. And he has his event version, which is basically the same. And it took over 25 nights on site, programming to get that all dialed in. And one half of the integration team had really got it and had been there every night for me. And the other one didn't get it at all. And the results have been fantastic. It is running. Ultimately, the integrator did come around to it. But that's where collaborating, we can do things which people don't know this stuff can do. And yet clients are spending, in that case, $500,000, $250,000 on their lighting control system. Why shouldn't it be perfect at all times of day? Haven't we justified that for them, right? Like, isn't that what they're paying for?
The custom integrators, the dealers that are selling this stuff now, they're just getting into the world of lighting because now that lighting is a technology and no longer just a light bulb, right? And while switches are still there, a lot of them now are intelligent, can do different things at different times of day, or, based on how you interact with it from a push sequence or something like that. maybe it's a how, or maybe it's an example, because you both mentioned that you've had a lot of products with integrators on them. What's the best way for projects that have a lighting designer on them already for integrators to get in tune so that the success comes all around the board?
There's so much scope for them to make enormous amounts of money making our work fantastic if they come at it in a positive and cooperative way. And many do. For example, when an integrator comes and says, I could supply the lights on this project, if they choose to be cooperative with us and use our specification and so on, our specifications will tend to be higher spec, higher value, higher profit packages than compared to what they would do if there was not a lighting designer on board. We're likely to have more integrations into shelves and into 1,000 little bits. We typically find that linear integrations and things like that might be anywhere from 30 to 60% of a budget of a project. So there's a lot of money sitting there in those things. And if they want to work with us and get that right, we're fine. Our goal is to get the client the end project. We have no financial interest in the sale of the thing. If an integrator is coming to us and saying, hey, I will take that, I will guarantee that the drivers that I might substitute in are not going to flicker with the control system and you'll have the ability to sign off on them and so on. There's no reason why they can't sell the $750,000 scheme rather than the entry-level market, entry lighting designer level market stuff that a lot of integrators are selling. So there's more money to be made there. And I have no problem with that. If they're clear with the client, hey, we're selling this thing and you're getting a turnkey service, I don't even mind them charging more than what a distributor would be charging for it. Because if they're saying, hey, it's turnkey and I'm going to provide the care from the point where the lighting designer hands it over right to the point where the thing is working, that's great. It's fantastic for the client.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope there is the white glove service that you're talking about, that we like to think that we provide on these types of projects. And so I think really the value proposition has to come from something more than just light fixtures, because they can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be from the integrator. So what do they bring to the table by providing the lighting that actually is the benefit to the client? This is yet to be seen. We've had a couple of projects with integrators supplying lighting. I think they're learning a lot about it. Things like submittals, timeliness, things they don't know. There's a lot to learn, I would just say.
Interior designer finish sign-offs. And
all of these kinds of things, yeah. I mean, what we think of as sort of the most basic, it's all very new to them. They don't know what they don't know yet. So there's a learning curve that has to come there. But to answer your question about what makes a project successful, I would say that I don't really think lighting is that different than it used to be. I don't think this digital thing really transforms anything that sort of says, well, now it's an integrator thing. Because I feel like digital stuff has been around for 25 years. Nothing's new. Okay, some color tuning stuff. Okay, interesting. If you're using it, if you know how to use it, then we can have a conversation if it's the right solution for the project. But it doesn't change the game. The same integrators we've been working with for 25 years are the same ones we're working with today. Everyone just has to sort of come up with what's happening in the world. I don't think it's been a revolution. I don't think there is a huge change. But what has become more common is projects are more complicated, or more complex, I should say. And so really it's about the collaboration that's necessary to deliver these projects. By and large, most of our work is not in Los Angeles. I know that most of Thomas's work is not in Mexico. So really we need to sort of rely on these integrators as our collaborators, as the boots on the ground, in the field, on these projects, a second set of eyes, if they really are interested in delivering the lighting at the level that we're hoping that we're delivering the lighting at.
I think integrators would do really well to understand our business model as well, to understand the financial side of what independent lighting designers do, because we don't make any money from selling the lights, from specifying the lights. Our business is selling time. Our business is not selling design, because the client is buying a more beautiful house, a better experience, all of those things. But what we're selling, the thing we have less of at the end of a project, is time. We don't have less knowledge, we've got more, We don't have less portfolio, we have more. We're winning in all those things, but fundamentally we're selling time. And so integrators who work with us to really preserve that for us, reduce the time that goes into things, not force us to charge clients more or not force us to take a hit for the client, are taking care of the integrator, taking care of the lighting designer rather. And that's an incredibly powerful thing, because if they're taking care of us, it makes it really easy for us to take care of them. Site intel, I'm on site. This GC doesn't know his ass from his elbow. Okay, great. We're going to do more follow-up early on whether our details are being built right. That kind of intel coming from an integrator who helps us save our time is helping us make our businesses better. We can do the same for them.
I think on that same note, and this is becoming a business conversation now, is that I think we have access to a lot of projects. I know they have access to a lot of projects, but the symbiotic relationship that we create is really meaningful. We're often brought in much earlier than the integrators. We come along with the architect, the interior designer, early on in the project. Integrators, unless they're already an incumbent, they've done other homes for the same client before, usually come in later. So we have that opportunity to refer those people who are good to us and are good collaborators, make our lives easier. They are first in line for that next project. So however we can sort of, the goal is work smarter, not harder, right? So if we can create an alliance of people who know how to do what we're all trying to accomplish, then the world's a better place.
There's a fierce reality that exists right now that sometimes lighting designers on projects and integrators don't exist, but more often than not is the latter, where integrators are a part of projects and lighting designers don't exist due to a lot of what you said about maybe the nature of when they come on board or what's already been completed or even built. They don't necessarily have the opportunity to influence lighting in a way beyond, quote, the infrastructure that's already been put in place. What do you both hope for in terms of the profession of lighting design and how it can better coexist with the custom integration world and these integrators and dealers?
It's so hard to generalize this, but I think there's a lot of generalization that's happening in this conversation. So I think for us, it's the sort of the shared values, right? It's delivering at this level. We are out there to make a project that is a 10. 7s and 8s aren't really acceptable. So we need somebody who's on board, like Thomas described, to go the mile to make it happen. That's all pretty clear in our document. So whoever first sees our drawings knows. There's an electrician in town. They know when drawings from actually either of us come through. We've talked about it. It takes a special eye to sort of look at and go through it. And that's not meant to be braggy or whatever. It just means that we have a lot of intention behind all the things that we've decided. So that everybody that's in line downstream from that set of drawings needs to also be willing to go the mile, share those values to deliver excellence to the client. Motivations are different for everybody in that sort of downstream of this, right? So like our motivation is, sure, we have a project, we have a fee, it's a given. But at the end of the day, our goal is to deliver something really special. So it's, again, the motivations are different down the line and whatever happens there. So it's just really about project delivery at the end of the day for us. I don't know, Thomas.
I think there's sort of three areas that we need to get going as an industry. We need an etiquette of how we deal with each other. So we need to know that if a lighting designer's already written a specification, you don't come in and propose, some wonderful color mixing, tone shifting light fixture as a replacement, as though it's better, without having had a conversation with us. There's an etiquette thing. Similarly, we don't undermine the things that they bring. There's a joking T-shirt that floats around which says, "Can I talk to you about Sonos?" Which is sort of like a integrator coming to us and saying, "Can I talk to your client about Ketra?" It's the same thing. So there's an etiquette thing there that needs to be developed. But we shouldn't be undermining them. We should be building them up. We want to work for success, mutual success. So etiquette is one part of things. I think the integrating world would do very well to study a little bit of how the American Institute of Architects has structured projects. So there's a whole series of procedures from concept design, schematic design, design development, construction document, submittals, RFIs, all that sort of stuff through to completion, so that there is an agreed process for how a keypad layout is going to be developed and who's going to sign off on it and so on, and when they're going to ask for what information and so on. So I think there's a formal structure. And then there's a quality topic. And Sean's term, which I love, the white glove service, is what it's really about. What does it take to do the final delivery? And often that's in the programmer's hands, or it's in the person doing startup who's doing the handover and is making sure that everything is controlled as expected and is shaking out the electrician's mistakes, is shaking out the warranty failures in the products before we get there. But if we can get those three things together, I actually think that this is a really good alliance.
What was the second point again?
Process. Submittals and keypad plans.
Right. So one thing that I would sort of bring up here is that I think that the integrators are kind of used to servicing themselves. They're going to get an approval for whatever their equipment is. They're going to install it themselves, service it themselves. They're in a very sort of their own world. But here with lighting, when they're engaged with a lighting designer, they're really there to implement somebody else's vision. And so the care that goes with that. So now they're communicating and collaborating with somebody outside of their typical sphere. So it comes down to the AIA processes as an example of submittals, communication, coordination, collaboration, all of the things that are kind of new. Most of the integrators' palette of stuff is not necessarily a required building system. Lighting is a required building system. So now they're also introduced to a whole world of codes and things that are new to them, that are different because there is no building code around a speaker, as an example. Not to sort of demean anything. I'm just sort of saying they have stepped into a very different world and a very different kind of process that I think once outside of themselves, they need to understand a bit more of what that is. Let's talk a little bit about what it means when we hand over our work for implementation to others, whether that's just to the contractor and the various parties that come about our documents.
This is one of the major issues of how you deliver a happy, successful project, is really whether it becomes a fairly limited but important dialogue with the electrician, with the GC, sometimes with the plasterers, often with the mill workers, and particularly with integrators.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that we tend to have more access to everyone you said before? You said integrators?
Yeah, unless we force the case. Yeah. I think integrators are often, partly they're employed quite often directly by the client, separate from the contractor, which is such an odd condition.
I mean, oftentimes, we're direct to the client too.
Right. Well,
you would think that the client would be the person that would connect us. I don't know that the client actually understands what the symbiotic relationship is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's really two pyramids under a client. There's the design team pyramid, which is all of us under the architect who's then to the client, or all of us under the architect who's then to the client's rep and the client. And then the client down to the contractor and the subcontractors and the subcontractors and so on. And that's the structure for almost everyone we deal with. But then the integrator is often coming on a third path on that. And if everyone plays nice together, that isn't inherently a problem. Sure. But it does make it a very different environment because, for example, the integrator doesn't issue their submittals to the GC, who then issues them to the architect, who then distributes them to the relevant consultants. Is going to the client. So the client may not even know that we need to see the engraving report, that the interior designer needs to see the keypad finishes report, and all of those sorts of things. So a really useful thing to do is draw an org chart for a project. Yeah. It can be a nasty little pencil scribble, but it can often answer a lot of questions. But it also tells you who you go to when you want to know something. So when we join a project, if there's already an incumbent controls company on, we want to know that and reach out and have a conversation with them. But more often they come in after us and not necessarily in conversation with us. We're not necessarily part of the bid process and so on. And so we want when they join for them immediately to reach out. Hey, there's a lighting designer on this. And they need to ask the question, how involved do you want to be? Where are the limits? Are you a control freak? Sean? Or are you largely disinterested, you've handed over your material and so on, in which case, what do you want to hand over to me now, and I'll run with it? And either of those are fine within the models that people choose to work in. But it's really important that the second of the two organizations to join, whether it's the lighting designer or the integrator, that in that moment of the second one joining, the conversation is started.
I think it's important to understand how much we are in the trenches together to really pull the project off, especially at the very end when there's limited time to really sort of achieve it. There's a lot of components to sort of what I think makes a great relationship with an integrator. And I think in the beginning, it's sort of the expectation management. I know I use that term a lot, but sort of like, who's on first, who's doing what, and what the different responsibilities are. I think, in recent years, aside from all the sort of normal process that we're used to sort of working with an integrator to deliver a project at the highest level, the new thing that's obviously sort of come up is fixture procurement.
Yes.
And so that's, for us, it's new, probably in the same way that it's new for them. And it's sort of, I think, understanding what it means to know that there is a lighting designer on the project, and what it means to know that they've spent potentially years prior to their engagement working with architect, interior designer, the owner, the whole project team to come up with a scheme that has been approved and refined. And then we can talk about what procurement means if it's the integrator's role to provide the lighting to the project.
There's always this question about value engineering or equals or equivalents or whatever you want to call that process. So, in our view, we're pretty rigid about not getting substituted without us involved. Correct. Eight projects out of 700. We're batting a pretty high average on protecting our projects. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we're not willing to change those things. Within those other 692 projects, most of them have done value engineering. Most of them have done equals or equivalents. It's just been done with our consent and quite often with our control.
Correct.
Can you provide just like a little bit of context, why you want to be involved in that substitution process?
The detail level in our specification is on so many fine points, whether it's the difference between the beam angle and field angle. So, there are some lighting controls manufacturers manufacturing downlights now where the field of the light is wide compared to the spot. So they're just not good for artwork lighting, and there's a lot of glare off them and they don't take accessories. So we may not want to be substituted with a controls manufacturer's luminaire that isn't a superbly performing luminaire because we're coming at this project because it's a highly art-driven project and so on. Mm-hmm. So those subtleties are really hard to deal with. There are some other absolute ones which can get lost really fast. One of our friends, Greg Mackel, was writing recently about a project where the substituted fixtures or the integrators fixtures that they provided didn't factor in the thick ceiling collars. So you just need a different front piece on your fixture. It costs you $12 extra or something. But without it, you have no adjustability to your light, because that's the thing that accommodates dealing with the fact that the ceiling was presumably T&G on plaster or wood panel on plaster or right. Yeah, and so a lot of that stuff has been thought about in incredible depth, and it can't just be substituted. Or the trims on the light fixtures have been matched to the window frames, and so a different dark bronze is not an okay dark bronze because it was specific to the window frames.
We have a project now where there were no submittals. Everything was ordered incorrectly because they just don't know what they don't know. And ultimately they're going to learn, and we're going to get to that place. But to participate, I think, in the supply, we sort of hope and expect the same kind of courtesy and etiquette that comes with all of our professional relationships here. So I think if there's a conversation about supply, it's understanding that there is a design in place and there is an intention there. And then from there, it goes to what may or may not be possible, and if the conversation is actually benefiting the owner at the end of the day. We are hired typically by the owner. We're delivering for them. We've been working with them for a very long time to achieve this collective vision. So I think it's just sort of making sure that, those things are aligned. Who provides the lighting at some level for us? We're agnostic to it. So it's sort of really about best practices and getting the right thing at the right time at the right price.
If they say, hey, what about this fixture, which we also handle and we can do it cheaper? If it's a genuinely equal or equivalent fixture, great. When it comes to pinhole down lights, there are really 3 price tiers, right? There's a domestic grade, there's a budget grade, and there's a premium grade. And you could list out the 10 or 12 manufacturers working from $400 up to $900. But if you're taking a $400 fixture and replacing it with another $400 fixture, but you're getting it for $360 because you can negotiate better and it's performing at the same level, great. My client gets 10% back. That's just a win for everyone involved. So a lot of it's having an understanding of who all the different stakeholders are and what that alternate is doing for the project.
Sure.
And if it's making you a lot more money, but it's making the lighting design worse, it's making the client poorer, and it's making the lighting design weaker, then there's going to be a lot of resistance. But if it's making the project cheaper, as good or better, and making the client happier, and making us look like we're a good, coherent team who works together and plays nice, that's fantastic. Win all the way around.
Sure.
Why residential design? Why do you do it? What do you love about it?
I think residential design is one of the most experimental areas. It's one of the places you can do the most varied work. In a commercial environment, you have to meet the needs of all people of all types under all circumstances. So just simply meeting, standards for ADA accessibility and so on defines the shape of the sconces you can have on the walls. Whereas in residential design, you have the ability to have a conversation with the client about what's important to them, and it can be wildly varied.
I mean, these are really complex projects, the ones that we work on, that are not, dare I say, as simple as people think they are, or as simple as even commercial projects that people think are kind of like the thing. In a residential project, not only are there the different types and preferences, but there's also an immense amount of differing program in one project. So like if you were doing an office space, as an example, you might have private offices, open office space, conference rooms, reception as basic programmatic elements. Here, you could have 30 different programmatic elements in this project, and you have to solve for each. There needs to be a through line or continuity to it, if that's the idea, or is it that you really have these different experiences when you transition from one space to the other? Because no 2 projects are really alike. Understanding what the layers that are important to the design team are and how it's part of our responsibility to compose the lighting using all of the various elements and not just, say, the architectural lighting elements.
One of the big challenges is trying to get out of a client what they want in terms that they can cope with as well. Because it's not patronizing to say they don't have good language in light. Of course they don't. They're not the professionals in the room. We're the subject matter experts in it. It's patronizing for us to tell them what they need. So for us, our role is to work out how to get out of them a really good brief. And the architects and the interior designers and everyone else. But it starts with the client, of course, because that's who we work for. And I think that one of the things which is as the integrator world connects with this is learning to interview their client well, and then learning to do something meaningful with that is important. One of the first things that we do with a client, we have a 10-point questionnaire, which we would never read to the client or send to them, because billionaires and such people do not want to be treated like they're coming into the questionnaire at the Hertz rent-a-car. Right? Like, it needs to be more sophisticated than that. But one of the first questions we ask is, what's your house to you? And they won't know how to answer that, particularly not in light. So you have to help them out and you have to take them through. And you don't put words into their mouth, but you give them things that they can react to or resonate with or not resonate with. And so we'll often say, I'll often tell the story of my house. Like, my house is a retreat. I spend a lot of time on the road. I spend a lot of time exposed to, people who have expectations of me, whether it's clients or, work environment and so on. And when I close that gate behind me, I want the world to go away. For a lot of our other clients, their house is their embassy. It's how they express their business, or it's how they express their place in the social order. It's where they run charity fundraisers, or it's where they invite people to come and see their house. And having that conversation with the client, you'll find, or it's a place just to raise their kids, and they want their kids to have Legos everywhere. I think if integrators, who we're spending a lot of time with this week, could take anything away from this, it's working out how to engage with their clients for the experiential side of lighting design, and then working out how to deliver it, because that is the measure of what is good enough. Is your client happy with the end result?
When you guys think about the integrator, when you think about this questionnaire, you're trying to get some cues in order to start to think about what you do in your world of designing with light. Thomas, Sean, thanks so much, guys. I know you're super passionate about what you do. Obviously, you believe in what you do, and the thousands and thousands of projects you have completed are the satisfactional guarantee and commitment to what you do does matter and does make a difference. As you continue in your journey to not only do your work, but get others to think about the impact light can have, thank you. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for caring. But most importantly, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for bringing us all together.
Indeed. Thanks, Sam.
On another topic, I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about retail grade lighting controls. The financial and economic structures around this are changing fast. The reason that the retail grade stuff isn't going to work for the houses we're doing is it doesn't have the logical hierarchy of organization of a full-on lighting programmer's laptop. I'm really interested to see what happens to the integration world as those things take over.
Certainly creates a lot of options. I do think that some of the consumer or prosumer type products are very, very easy to use in such a way that it seems like even the pro systems could have the first interface could be as simple as that. Yes. And then there could be layers behind it that go deeper and deeper for more complex programming. But it does seem that you can take a simple, system that you can buy on Amazon for a few $100s to do a couple of rooms and kind of do some pretty incredible things in an afternoon. Yeah. That it seems like there should be a way that the pro systems could be as simple as that, so that the things that we're talking about that you see that are native in those apps that happen right in front of your face, live as it were, and save instantly, feel like that same sort of ability should be there, or capability should be there in the pro systems as well.
A lot of it's going to increasingly come into the quality of programming that you do. It's going to come into how humanistic is your understanding of the lighting controls in this space. Does a client feel like as they move through this space, it works beautifully for them? And it can be things as simple as in a screening room, you press the button and the lights at the front of the room fade out over 2 seconds, but the lights at the back of the room fade out of 7 seconds, and in between, and it just feels like the light just flows to the back and out. Mm-hmm. And that becomes in the programming and so on. And so I think as integrators start looking at how you compensate for not being able to build profit into the hardware, even on the programming side of things, they're going to have to start building money into the quality of programming and the humanity of the programming.